Today we're doing a transmission service on a NF 9-month 95 Ford Fairlane. So we're lucky that this one has a dipstick. A lot of the later ones don't have a dipstick, but what we usually do when they have a dipstick is we suck the oil out through the dipstick via vacuum pump. Makes the job a bit quicker, safer and easier. But anyway, just for instruction's sake, I'm going to take this one off like in the later models that don't have a dipstick, just to show you. Make sure you jack the vehicle up safely, make sure the stands are adequate and that it's high enough for you to, get in and out from underneath. You'll need a little bit of room to manoeuvre, especially with getting the filter off. There's a little piece of the retainer's spring steel, so you'll need to sort of fiddle with that a little bit. But anyway, I'll go ahead and start the service. We'll take the filter off and change that, clean the magnet and do the rest. Now we're just going to loosen the bolts at the back of the transmission. And now we'll just loosen these ones. We've taken the other bolts right off. We just loosen these off and the oil will start to come out. But be careful that it's hot. You can loosen these if you want it to come out a little bit faster. And we'll just let it drain out a little bit because it's a little bit hot. The pan off here. Over here you've got the magnet and you can see it's covered in fine metal, hasn't had a service for a while. Over here there's a little bit of fine metal as well, and in these little grooves here they're supposed to catch any fine metal so it doesn't circulate through the transmission. Now to take the filter out, you've got this little spring steel retainer. We just pop that out of there with a screwdriver and then we'll wiggle this filter out. I'll use multi-grips here. When you pop it out, just so the oil doesn't go everywhere, you just sort of suspend the filter there so the oil will hit on the top of the filter and not spray everywhere. It'll just run back down the filter and into the tray. Here we have a diagram of the valve body, and it just shows which solenoids are which You've got the front of the transmission here where the filter goes in. You've got your S6, your S2, S3, S1, your S5, which is your pressure control, and your S4. There's another one, another solenoid that's in the torque converter that can't be seen. You have to remove the transmission to replace that one. Here we've got what happens when you get your shifts. First gear, you got your S1 and your S2 are on. Second gear, the S1 turns off. Third gear is limp mode, which on this particular transmission, if what it basically means is if there's no electrical power going into the transmission, it'll go into third gear, which is limp mode. So if any of these have a problem, you can get the transmission going into limp mode. And here we have, this is out of a BA Falcon that has a sports shift, but it basically shows all the operation of all the solenoids in each of the gear ranges. You can freeze it and see which ones. You'd have to get a code out of it. Various ways of doing that, either with a scanner or doing it manually, to tell you which solenoid is at fault, or whether the inhibitor switch is at fault or the computer. Now, I've seen people trying to pry these seals for the filter out with a screwdriver. You'll end up damaging the housing and then you'll get all sorts of problems. What we use is a pair of circlip pliers, and you just slowly twist it and it'll come out. There we go, it's just on rubber. We've got a new filter and seal. You can see we leave the seal on here when we're fitting it. It'll bottom out on a little step there on the filter. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just a matter of pushing it up into the housing. You can see it there. You just wiggle it in slowly and it goes right up, and then we'll put the retaining spring steel retainer back on. A bit hard to do with one hand. Clean it up and clean the pan and put it all back together. It's important to just clean any road dirt that's off on the pan rail there. If you don't clean it off properly, what can happen when you put the new seal on there, it can be sitting up on the road dirt, and because it'll always sit in the new spot and cause a leak down the track. Anyway, we just run around the pan rail lightly with the scraper, not damaging the surface, just taking all that mud off. This particular transmission doesn't have any band adjustments. Some of the previous models had external band adjustments. They're adjusted using shims, which are on you got to take the valve body out to adjust it, but there's no band adjustment on these. They're set. Here we've got the clean pan, clean magnet, and new pan seal ready to go back on. Put all the bolts through the rubber pan seal, just to make sure that it doesn't pop out when you're putting it in, and put them all on and left them loose. And now we're just going to do them up in a cross zigzag fashion, and then we've got to fill it up with oil. Now we've finished the service on it. We're just going to run around and just check all the other points where you can get oil leaks. That's the rear servo cover seal there. You've got the selector shaft seal under the inhibitor switch here. You've got where the loom goes into the transmission. It can leak there. Towards the back here, you've got the extension housing gasket. extension housing seal. You've got where the speedo, where are we? Right up the top there, you can just see the speedo going in there. Sometimes you have to remove these two outer cross member bolts just to gain a bit more room. There's an O-ring here on the front band, or the front servo, and there's another little seal on the selector. Now they're all the points where it can leak from the outside of the transmission. Oh, and this one's got a filler tube too, so the O-ring in there can be leaking or weeping. A lot of the later ones here where my hand is, there's a little plug and you fill them from here. We're lucky today we're doing a 1994 model, so they've still got the filler tube. This one seems to have a rear main engine seal leak. You have to take the transmission out to replace that. They can also leak at the front pump, usually at the front pump seal if the bush is worn, or at the O-rings can also become hardened and flattened out. While we're under here, we'll just check everything else for the customer. Just check the boots there, that they're not perished or cracked. It's just like a courtesy type thing. Check his exhaust. The universal joints. The way I do it is I stick my thumb in so it's touching both sides of the universal, and you just wriggle it. If you feel any movement on your thumb, it means it's worn. The front and rear one. The diff appears to have been reconditioned. It's been painted black, and it seems to be weeping a little bit of oil here on where the breather tube comes out of the diff. So whether that's been overfilled or if the breather becomes blocked, it can create a bit of pressure there as the oil heats up. But everything seems okay with regards to the transmission here, and now we'll just lower it down and fill it up with oil. Now we're going to pump in about 3.5 litres of TQ95, which is the recommended oil or the equivalent oil into the transmission, and then we'll start it up and just check the oil level. We're lucky that this one's got a dipstick, otherwise we'd be doing it all underneath. It's a lot probably cleaner and more efficient doing it this way, but anyway, we'll just put the oil in and then we'll start it up, go through the gears and check the oil level. We'll just change the gears, park, this, and pull the handbrake on. We'll just check the oil level again now when the motor's running. Now it's important try not to overfill it. If you do overfill it, it's not a good thing. If the oil gets above the spinning parts, it can aerate the oil. Because the system's hydraulic, air can be compressed, oil can't be compressed, so if you do overfill it, it's better to sort of have a little bit less. It's just below the top mark here, but we've got a vacuum pump. We can actually just poke a tube through the filler tube and just suck out a bit if there's too much. If you're doing this at home, it's a little bit more difficult. You'd either have to loosen one of these cooling line hoses or loosen the pan to let a bit of oil out. Anyway, it's better to, probably saves a lot of time if you just put a little bit less in and then just top it up bit by bit until you get it close. Take it for a run, make sure it's at operating temperature because the oil will expand a little bit. and not go over full. We're going to take this one for a test run now, and we'll come back and check the oil level hot. Now we've just come back from the test drive. It's nice and warmed up. Let's see how many Ks we've done there. I'm not sure, probably about 8 Ks, 8 or 10 Ks. We'll just select all the gears. Neutral. Too much, probably about 1 centimetre over the hot mark. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little bit shiny. So we're just going to hook the vacuum pump up and just suck a little bit out. And we'll just suck it out until we see the hose jumping. It means it's starting to suck a bit of air. We've measured it out on the dipstick to where the mark should be. And there it is now, it's just starting to suck a bit of air. Right on the top of the hot mark there. So that's perfect. I've got the motor running, we'll just check the power steering. Again, the motor has to be running when we check that. Topped it off because you get splashing, so you'll get a false reading. And there we go. Put it in, pull it out. That's right on the top mark there. But I don't know if you can hear that. There's a little funny noise in there, so I'd say that pump's probably on its way out. And that's basically the service on a BTR 4-speed. Now this one's a Fairlane, 94 Fairlane NL, I think it is, or an NF. We'll have a look here. NF, 95 NF. Okay, well thanks for watching, and stay tuned for other videos as we make them from time to time. Thank you.